Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com with another video on Svelte. This is going to be part of the 102 series. We're going to get into some more advanced topics in Svelte, particularly with state management. So basically, in this video, we're going to be talking about stores. So the whole idea of a store, whether it's like any of these these frameworks, the idea of a store is just sort of a collection of data that exists outside of your components. Okay, and so you're storing data inside of it, and when that data changes, it can still trigger components re-rendering that are monitoring this data. So this is kind of like, I think the terminology of stores kind of first really kind of introduced with Redux. At least that's when I first heard this sort of concept in these kind of frameworks. So the way this would work in Svelte is we create a file. So we'll create a file in source called, we'll just call it store.js. You know, doesn't have to be anything fancy. Okay, in this file, we have to import you have to import, oh my god, I have to already look at the docs. Okay, and that's going to be same as here, writable. That's what I was thinking. Okay, import writable from Svelte dot store. Okay. And what the writable does is going to allow us to create a variable that is a store. So we're going to want to export it so we can use it elsewhere. So we're going to say export export let, do I use let or do I use const? I'm sure it's interchangeable. They used const, so I'm going to use that. Okay. Const count equals writable, and then you put like an initial value. So we'll just stick with the example that they use, which is 0, because it's going to be a variable to count. Okay, and it's exported, so now I can import it. So now let's go back to our app.svelte. If I want to use this store, or any of my components want to use this store, all they have to do is actually import the store. So I would just import count from /store.js. Okay, and now what I want to do, well, I already have a variable called count. So let's call it count as store count. Okay, we'll rename it. Okay, so let's see here. Or I could just get rid of the existing count. So let me just clear all this stuff out from our previous exercise. Okay, and let me just get rid of this component. We're not going to worry about other components at the moment. Okay. So then what I want to do is create a variable. Okay, so we're just going to say let my count. And then what I do is I take the count and I want to use its subscribe feature. That means that this component subscribes to this store in this particular store from the store file. Okay, and then what you do is you pass in a callback, which takes in the value from the variable. And then what you're going to say, my count equals the value. My count equals the value of count. Okay, so there we go. So now I can do h1, and this equals my count, and that should equal 0. So let's actually run the dev server. So let's cd into project1 and do npm run dev. Okay, let that open. This looks like it's running, and it's on localhost 5000, so just open it that way. And see, we see 0. Okay, and I can have another component updated. It doesn't have to be updated here nor there, because it's all connected to one value. So when I connect another component, they all have access to the same thing. So then what I can do is we'll make a button. Okay, and I'm just going to use an inline function. So we're going to say on click equals curly brackets, and we'll just pass an arrow function. If I remember right, it would be okay, let me just finish writing that out. There we go. If I remember right, this should be count dot update, and then I should be able to update the count, and then we'll just say to my count plus 1. Okay, and it doesn't like, well, probably wants a button, some text in there, like me. So let me just double check that that's how they did it in the documentation. The incrementer, count.update. Oh, okay, pass an arrow function. And it takes, which also takes the value, makes sense. So count update. So I'll use v for the current value. So it's going to return the value plus 1, and that becomes the new value of count. Okay, let's see here, on click, curly bracket, and then here's the function, and then there's that. Still doesn't like this. Turns to close an element. Oh, did I not finish? Well, attempt to close an element that was not open. Oh, because I made it self-closing. There we go. And there's an extra slash close button here. And that's where that extra curly bracket went off to. Okay. There we go. So let's go back and take a look at the screen. Okay. Now if I click this, see, it counts. So it's updating that store, but again, it could be any store that uses that same count that's updating that same piece of variable, that same data. That count variable exists outside of the component. It exists in store, and any component can import it. So what's cool about that is then you don't have to worry about things like props drilling, and it's reactive. Okay, it'll update whenever these update functions run. Another thing to keep in mind, though, you don't want to be subscribed forever. Okay, so you're going to want to make sure you import import, I think it's on destroy from Svelte. Okay, because what you want to do is that when the component gets destroyed, you want to make sure that you unsubscribe from it. Because if it's a component that you like render on and off regularly, it's constantly creating another my count, and it can create, because of the subscription kind of keeps the variable alive, and you're gonna start eating up memory. So it'd be like on destroy, and then on destroy, just kind of like any lifecycle function, you'd want to pass it an arrow function, and on destroy, you would just do like count.unsubscribe. Okay, and then that way when the component gets removed, it would unsubscribe and prevent a memory leak while the app is running. So that is how stores work. Okay. The other cool sort of global data management tool there is context. Okay, you might remember this from like React, where context can be used to deliver data up and down the component tree. We can do that as well here in Svelte. Okay, so how would I do that? Okay, we'll create context. Okay, so we actually have to import that. So actually, let me go refer to the docs on that again. Okay, as you can tell, Svelte is not my first framework. Okay, or not my main framework. Okay, but we have to do we need to import that? I assume so. So we import it here on mount. Here we go. Yeah, we do. We import set context. Good. Okay, that's all I wanted to confirm. Okay, so we're going to import set context. Import set context from Svelte. Okay, and the way it would like you to do this is you create like a variable called key, const key equals an empty object. And the reason you're doing this is because the variable key doesn't hold an empty object. What it holds is the memory address. So any other attempts at creating like an empty object is going to have a different memory address in it. So it's going to truly be unique. And we're going to want to export that so we can make that accessible to other files. So we always make sure we're referring to a very particular context. You could use a string, you could use a number as your key, but again, you might have some other, third-party library that actually uses the same word to use to refer to their own context or to refer to. So you could have a collision per se. So then I'm going to use set context. Okay. Okay. And set context, what you want to do, okay, is you pass in a key. So that's going to be key. And then you pass in the context object, the object that you want to make available to the other deals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in my count. Okay, I'm going to pass in my count. And yeah, so that's done. Okay, so let's go back to our components. I'm going to bring back, because I already have mount imported, so we'll use mount. Okay, so let me add mount back to here. Mount. Okay. Again, mount is not really showing anything right now. Because all mount was like the API call, which it's not doing, interestingly enough. Let me do a Control-Shift-I. Okay, app.svelte. Let me think about that on mount.components.svelte. Here is this. So theoretically, it should be rendering this component, which should be making that API call. But I don't see it making that on. Is it doing it? Yeah, no, I'm not seeing it. Interesting. So now if we go to Svelte, let's refresh that. I go to the name, we go to the main, we go to the H1 button. Is it not re-rendering? Here is mount between H1 and the button. And we are calling it mount. Oh, is there an error here? Error. Default is exported by node module. Svelte is imported by app.svelte. Let's see here. Error. Default is not exported by node. So it's complaining about one of my exports, probably count, I'm assuming. So let me see here. Count store.js. Export const count. Yeah, that looks like it should be fine. It's it's complaining about set context because it's a named export. Brr. So this needs to be in curly brackets. Okay, there we go. There we go, that looks better. So let's go to mount and let's bring in that context. So let's import. Actually, I already have Svelte there, so I can just import get context from there. Get context. Okay, and then I'm just going to say data. Get rid of the on mount. I'm not going to worry about that right now. Let's say data equals data equals get context. Oh, and I need to import the key from app. So let's import key from /app. get context, and then we pass in the key, so that way it knows what context to get, and then that should return the context in the data. And again, there I think we just called it data my count. So now I have an error. So let's take a look. Error key is not exported by app.svelte, is it not? Const key, yeah, no, I exported it. Import key. Key is not exported by I can. Okay, I think I would. Yeah, why wouldn't that? Oh, because I think I need to do that in the JavaScript file, not in the Svelte file. So what I want to do is go back to store.js, add the key there. Okay. And then technically here in app, I imported the, I just might as well import it from here, key. Okay. And then in that case, I really want to import the key not from here, but from store.js. Okay, that looks like it worked out. Because I guess you can't export and then import things from another Svelte file. It has to be from a JS file. So there we go. So now they're both 0. Okay, but apparently context is not reactive. Okay, so context is not going to update the data. So see, but if you have static data that you want to send down, context is fine. If you want to send reactive data, then you use a store. But you see, it does receive the initial data. Okay, but the minute that I change the original store, it does not update the context receivers. So again, static set data you should send down with context, and it doesn't send it to the entire app. It sends it only to the children of the component that created the context, who can then access it using the key. Now let's try something else. Let's try start, just to illustrate this, let's start count with a value of 7. Okay, to show you that this should, see, both of them are receiving 7. But again, when you pass it as context, not reactive. Pass it as a store, and you subscribe to it, it's reactive. So there's just two different ways to provide the data across your app. It just depends what you're trying to do. So if you have like a lot of sort of static variables that are needed all across your app, context might be the right way to go. If you have a certain sort of app-wide state that you need to make available to different parts of your app, and those parts of your app need to be able to update that state, then stores are going to be the way you want to go. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.